Welcome back to the Gen X Experience. This is episode 46, and it is also the start of season 3, year 3 of the podcast. It is crazy to be here. And I feel a little rusty on these intro. I don't know why, because I took a month off. I've decided that January, since it's just it's a starter month. Someone told me recently that I'm just going to take a pause but anyway, we are diving back into the show, and this month for February our topic will be divorce. Yes, I know we're going there, we're hitting it hard because this is an important subject. It is something that Gen Xers deal with. I mean, everyone deals with it, but I think it's an important topic to discuss. And so this month we are going to have 2 conversations. If you're watching this, I just put up my 2 fingers as if y'all don't know what 2 looks like. And we're going to have 2 conversations with 2 different therapists. Today, we're going to talk to Oona Metz about dealing with divorce as a woman. And our next conversation, we will talk about dealing with divorce as a man, because this podcast is for everyone. And I want us all to feel like we're being heard and seen and have a place to listen. So stay tuned for that conversation coming later in the month. But today I have a conversation with Oona Metz, who is the author of a newly released book called Unhitched, The Essential Divorce Guide for Women. She is a licensed independent clinical social worker, a certified group psychotherapist, and a fellow of the American Group Psychotherapy Association. Her writing has appeared in Cognoscenti, the Psychotherapy Networker, Psychology Today, and the Los Angeles Review, as well as I read an article that she wrote on Time, and I also will be showing a clip for her recent appearance on CBS, their morning show. She has 30 years of clinical experience and specializes in treating women navigating divorce. Oona leads 3 weekly divorce support groups for women and trains mental health professionals across the country to lead them as well. I know you're really going to enjoy this conversation, especially if you've been divorced or you're going through a divorce or thinking about it. It's a very tough time in your life. And Oona provides a lot of interesting thoughts and insights that I think will help you. And if you haven't been divorced, there's no doubt that you have friends or family members that have. And I think this is an important conversation for you to listen to as well, because you can learn a lot about what your friend or family member is going through and be there for them in the right way. Because I love us women, but sometimes, as I mentioned later in the podcast, we do not give each other the best advice. So I think this episode will definitely help. And without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Oona Metz. Thank you, Oona, for coming on the podcast to kick off the 3rd season of the show to talk about divorce, focus mostly on women, which I think it's really interesting from a Gen X perspective. As when I was growing up, I mean, most of the people I was friends with and knew didn't get divorced, but I know that divorce grew a lot. A lot more people were getting divorced, and the stigma was starting to go away. So now that we're in this lovely year, 2026, do you feel like it's gotten better, or do you feel like it's still there for women in certain parts of, like, if you're very religious or depending on how you grew up?
Definitely, if you're very religious, I think there's still a lot of stigma and shame attached. And yes, also depending on your family system and what your family believes. I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress in reducing shame and stigma, and that's a particular passion of mine. And but we still have a long way to go. And I think the way we reduce shame and stigma is by just continuing to talk about it, like we're doing today. So thank you for hosting this.
Oh, no, I think this is a very important topic. I mean, for all ages and demographics.
Yes.
But, we all know the history for women is that it used to be a long time ago, was getting a divorce for a woman was impossible. And also, when women weren't working, like, you were dependent on your husband for money.
Right.
And now we have a shift in that. So
it wasn't that long ago that women couldn't take out a bank loan or couldn't get their own credit card, or, I mean, it's, yeah.
It's I was born in 1974. And so, like, the changes were still happening then. And my mom would tell me stories about things just from her being, on her own before she married my dad. And it's it's nice to see things evolve. I know sometimes right now and I'm not going to get political, but I'll just say there are
Right.
people
Yeah.
trying to change
Yes.
things for us. So
Mhm.
since you are a psychotherapist and a social worker, what inspired you to focus on helping women with navigating divorce?
Great question. So I've been a therapist for the last 30 years. And when I was originally trained as a therapist, I got extensive training in group therapy. So I was running groups, therapy groups in my practice. And then about 16, 17 years ago, I got divorced. And when I got divorced, I kind of looked around and I thought, gosh, I'd like to go to a support group for women getting divorced. And no such thing existed. And I'm in Boston and, you know, a hotbed of therapists and group therapists, but no such thing existed. And so this little seed got planted in my mind. And I thought, maybe when I have enough time and distance away from my own divorce, that's something I'll do. And so I started these divorce support groups a couple of years later, and they were so gratifying to run. The women who came to them got so much out of them, and I saw so much change that I ended up starting three groups, and all three of those groups are still going today, 15 years later. They
Oh, wow.
meet every single week in person, same time, same place, different members, of course. People come in and use it for a while and then they leave. And so that's how I got started on this whole track. And it's just been wonderful work for me.
That's amazing. So what is different? I mean, we all know usually typical therapy, you go to
Mhm,
your therapist. What are the benefits to being in a group setting as opposed to
mhm.
just one-on-one?
Yeah, I think the benefits are enormous. I think women who are going through divorce oftentimes feel very isolated. When they first meet with me, they often say to me, how is it possible that half of marriages end in divorce and I don't know anyone going through one? So there's a sense of isolation. I think also women feel so much during I mean, all people do, but especially women feel so much during a divorce. And sometimes they worry that they're feeling too much or they're not feeling the right thing. And so being in a group setting, first of all, it shows them they're not alone. There's other people just like them going through the same thing. And that their feelings are not too much or they're not, you know, wrong, and it can be very empowering too, and it's a lovely thing to feel like you kind of have this team behind you every step of the way who's like dying to hear, next week, what happened when you told your kids you were getting a divorce? What happened when you had that court appearance? What was it like when you set a boundary with your ex? And so I think the women who come to the group make these very deep connections with each other and really lift each other up. And it's so for me, it's just like wonderful to see that.
It is nice that when you're going through stuff to not feel like you're
Yeah,
alone, especially a divorce, because there's so many aspects to it. If you have kids, you have to tell
right,
them, depending on the age.
right.
If they're younger, you have to figure out custody. There's the financial stuff,
Yes,
there's the living stuff. So and then you're dealing with your emotions and your grief and loss
right.
over, losing your marriage. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you mentioned a lot of different things that are talked about in the group. And one of them dealing with kids and figuring out how
Hmm.
you talk about like how to tell them, and then is it do you when you talk about how to tell them, is it something like, you encourage people like sit down with the two of you, like how do you navigate that situation with your soon to be ex?
Yeah, great question. And all of this, certainly I'm so happy to talk about it on the podcast and just also to say that it's all embedded in my brand new book, which is called Unhitched, the Essential Divorce Guide for Women. So yeah, I really encourage people, if it's at all possible, for the two adults in the family to have a kind of idea of what they're going to say before they sit down with the kids and say it. And then to pick a time that works. Like timing actually matters. You don't want to do it, on the way to the kids' soccer game or the day before your kid goes off to camp. Or so really thinking about timing, I think, is important. And then also really giving the message about what's going to change and what's not going to change. And really, I think the only thing you can promise kids about what's not gonna change is your love for them. But I really encourage people, especially if they're feeling somewhat guilty about the divorce. People have a tendency to want to promise things to their kids. Don't worry, we'll always spend the holidays together. Or, don't worry, we'll still go on vacations together. Well, it's not necessarily lying. You might believe that in the moment, but you don't know what's going to happen in the future and how your feelings might change. So I really encourage people not to promise things to their kids. And of
And
course, to tell them like it's not their fault and to give them the message really loud and clear. Like, I know you're going to have a lot of feelings about this, and we really want to hear about your feelings at any time, now or in the future. At any time you can come to us.
And I've heard, I don't know if this is true. You're a therapist, you might know better than me, obviously. I've heard that adult children of divorce actually have a harder time dealing with it than younger children. Is that
Mm.
true, or does it
I,
matter what age you
I
are?
mean, I think it's case by case, but I
Mm.
think in general, it's probably harder on younger kids, more because they are the ones that are going to have to move and be in two separate houses, and they have so much contact with their parents, whereas older kids don't have as much contact. But I think older kids and young adult kids, they still are impacted by divorce for sure. Sometimes people think like, well, I'll just wait till they go to college, and then once they're in college, that's what a lot of people think. Like, once they're in college, they'll be fine. They won't care. But they do care. They do care. So it's still important to let them know that you are open for conversation. You're open to hear what they have to say about
Yes, very, very true. Because
it.
I mean, yeah, as a kid, I can't imagine going through that. You have so many feelings and emotions, and
Mhm.
and if you're younger, it's probably harder to express those than when you get a
Yeah.
little older. So
Yeah.
let's flip the other side to women who don't have kids who are child free,
Yep.
because they're still, they may be fortunate or not fortunate, depending on their view, of not
Hmm.
having to see their ex ever again, which can be
Right.
good, but can also be really hard on them. Do you
Yeah.
find that their struggles are, I'm sure, similar, but a little bit different as well?
Yeah. I mean, part of it depends on whether or not they are child free by choice or if they're child free by timing. So I've had some women who come to my group who are like 38, 39 years old and getting divorced, and they don't have kids, and they're glad that they don't have kids with their ex, but they're also really sad because they want to have kids, and they feel like, I don't know how I'm going to recover from my divorce, meet somebody new, get married, or partner up, whatever, and then have a child when I'm already 39, 40, 41. So that can be really painful. And I think for people who are child free by choice, for some people it's a real relief to never speak to their ex again. For some people it's a loss. It really depends on what the relationship was like and what the divorce is like, because the divorce can really change how the relationship is, even if it's, you know, even if people are kind of growing apart, kind of divorce, then once splitting up the money comes and things like that, it can get pretty ugly pretty fast. So,
Yeah, I forgot about the point that, yeah, people get divorced younger. And because I'm thinking in my 50-year-old
uh-huh.
brain now,
Yep.
that there is that thing of like, I wanted kids, maybe you didn't have them with that person, which can
Mm-hmm.
be a blessing. But then there's that added stress of like, which women face regardless of
Mm-hmm.
like, my
Yes.
biological clock is ticking, my biological
Right.
clock is ticking.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that can
Yeah.
be really a challenge. So let's talk about boundaries, because you also mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who's dated divorced men, I have noticed issues with it's on both
Uh-huh.
sides, so I'm not
Yep.
just blaming men, but
Sure.
I feel like that's a huge problem that a
Mm.
lot of them, now granted, some of the men I've dated have kids, so I know that's a different challenge, but I
Mm-hmm.
do notice that like boundaries seem to be something that I think a lot of people don't think about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, find that to be true.
Yes, and I have an entire chapter in the book is all about boundaries, because I think boundaries really change in divorce, and people, it's kind of common sense that your boundary with your ex will change, but I think your boundary with lots of other people changes too during a divorce. And so kind of renegotiating some of those boundaries is really important. What are the kinds of things that you've seen when you talk about boundaries with people you've dated?
There are no boundaries.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, where, the ex might call and we had plans and they just changed them. I'm like, okay to, and it was like one where it was like their custody, they didn't have a solid custody agreement, which I found is weird.
Yeah.
One
That's tough.
where, the blame was put on the ex and the kids, and I was like, the common denominator is you, and or like,
Right.
letting like the ex kind of, well, claiming, I will say claiming, because there's
Yep.
always there's two sides of the story.
Yes.
That the
Yes.
ex was causing all these problems, and it
Right.
was because there
Right.
wasn't boundaries, and so,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I've
Yeah.
noticed, is either the lack of
Yeah. It's
boundaries or they're not
yeah.
solid.
Right. Especially if you have kids with the person, it's so important to have really clear boundaries. And I really encourage people, if when they're going through a divorce, to make sure that their parenting plan is really specific. Like, not only just like who has the kid on Monday, Tuesday, and who has the kid on Wednesday, Thursday, but like, what if there's a snow day? I live in Boston. We're about to get a lot of snow days. It's on my mind. What if there's a snow day? Who takes the kid then? What if the kid is sick for 3 days? Who takes the kid then? What if you have alternating weekends, but one person has a really important work trip, or one person wants to take the kid to a family wedding? How do you deal with that? Like, really getting those kind of rock solid written down, those kind of procedures. And hopefully you take that plan, you put it in a drawer, and you never have to take it out again. But at least you've thought through all of that. And if there is a disagreement, you can take the plan right back out of the drawer and say, look, here on page 37, it says, if there's a family wedding, we get to take the kid to the family wedding.
Yeah. That was actually one of the questions that I posted a video on TikTok, and someone asked about dealing with custody. And I think you gave them a very good answer for them to use as guidance.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I guess it relates to boundaries, is sometimes people get divorced and women get divorced, and like they have a really hard time. I mean, it's both sides, but like we're talking about women here, letting go and holding on to that anger and the hatred and the sadness for years and years and years, and then they don't move on with their lives. What, I'm sure this is in your book too, which will be included in the show notes, and we'll talk about the book in a little bit. But
Great.
what would be your advice to someone who's dealing with that, or if you have friends or family that you notice that, like, your sister or your cousin or your friend is just still not moving on with their life? What would you say they need to do besides therapy, or probably just therapy?
Right. Therapy is important. I think, there is a whole grief process of divorce. And I think people really need to have time to be sad and be angry. And then there's this line, right, of like, it's really important that they're able to express all of those feelings, and that could take some time, and it could be over time that those feelings evolve. And then there's a point, there's always this line of like, when are you expressing feelings in a way that's helpful, and when are you stuck? And so you're just repeating the same loop over and over and over again. And I think when people get stuck, oftentimes is when they have trouble letting go, right? And so they continue to be attached to either their ex or their marriage or their divorce, right? Like, it's not fair. I can't believe so and so did this. And I think, I was saying the other day on a different podcast, the opposite of love is not hate, because both love and hate keep you attached, right? I think the opposite of love is indifference. And I would say to somebody who's stuck, if you think of your life as like a pie, and what section of the pie are you devoting your energy towards your ex and towards being bitter, right? What can you do to add more things that give you meaning, purpose, and joy to your life? Because the more you can add things, it's hard to take that slice of pie out unless there's something else to fill in the pie. So the more you can add activities, relationships that give you meaning, purpose, and joy, the more that slice of bitter holding on will reduce. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that, because I think, because if you just focus on what happened and that person and what they did wrong to you, or you put focus on like how you feel that you failed, you're not going to move on with your life. And then you're going to look, it's going to be 20 years, and you're going to, wait a second, I'm in the same place I was before. And that's not, we only have so many days on this earth. Like,
exactly. And also sometimes I point out to people like, wow, you're really giving your ex a lot of power. You're giving your ex already took a lot from you during that unhealthy marriage or during that very contentious divorce. But wow, you're really giving a lot of power to that person by still holding on and letting them like really kind of rule your head, rent space in your brain. And
Yeah,
you don't want to do you want to rent space in your brain to that person? I don't think so.
yeah,
They're not
which I
paying
think
you.
can be applied too to if you're, dating someone and you still hold on, you break up and whether you've
Yes.
been together a long time and you hold on and then you're like, wait a second, they're not thinking about me. I mean, maybe
Right.
they are, whatever, but like, why am
Right.
I, yeah, I'm
Right.
giving them power they don't deserve and it's
Yeah.
holding me back. And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
got to get it all out and then move on. Real quick
Absolutely.
before you talk about your book, I just want to ask if you are, a friend of someone who's going through a divorce
Mhm.
or they're your sister, cousin, etc., what would be your advice to them to like help that person not be
Hmm.
annoying but also I would guess one thing would be just to listen, but what else can we do to make sure we're being a good friend, a good relative to them?
Yeah, yeah. I think, the decision is if you're the one who's initiating divorce, that decision is so hard. And so many women think about it for years and years and years before they make it. Like nobody gets married and thinks like, oh, someday I want to get divorced, right? So it's a really hard decision to make. And so I would not, as a friend or family member, please, please, please do not doubt your friend's decision. I mean, if your friend comes to you and says, I'm trying to decide what to do, will you give me some advice? Great. You can listen in and give advice. But if your friend says, hey, I want to let you know I've decided to get a divorce, please do not say to that person, but you were so great together, or, oh, you know, are you sure? Or have you tried everything? Because I can guarantee they did try everything. So please don't doubt them. And then I think just understand that the process can take a long time. Like a lot of women will tell me they have very well meaning friends and family, but the friends and family constantly saying, like, it's still not done. My God, why is it taking so long? It's not helpful to
Yeah.
hear that when you're in a really lengthy divorce process. And then I think also just really a lot of people lose couple friends when they're not a couple anymore. And so if you're part of a couple, like still invite your friend, and your friend may or may not feel comfortable still going, but please continue to invite or do some one-on-one things. Even if you're part of a couple, you don't have to always be with your person. Like invite that person out because they're likely needing to fill some time, especially if they're sharing parenting time with their kids. They may have every other weekend, they may be free. And you don't have to take them to an amusement park, every other weekend. You could say like, "Hey, I'm going grocery shopping and going to get a cup of coffee afterwards. You want to come along?" Like it doesn't have to be something that's so, amazing activity. It could be just like routine, like, "Hey, let's go do this thing together. I'm going to take a walk. You want to come?"
Yeah.
So we've got I just want to say one more thing. We've got such good traditions when somebody dies. Like we all, even if we don't do it, we know what to do, right? You're supposed to send a card. You're supposed to go to the funeral. You're supposed to go to the Shiva. You're supposed to attend. You're supposed to send flowers or bring a lasagna, or as one of my friends reminded me in Minnesota, I think it was, you bring a hot dish. You there's ways we know, there's traditions we know about when somebody dies, but when a marriage dies, we're not quite sure what to do. And yet that person's grieving too. So make sure that you attend to them.
Yeah, and especially, I think it's hard too if you're friends with both sides, both,
Yes.
and you're like, do I have to pick a
Yeah.
team? Or sometimes you're
Right.
in a couple and like the wife, like, oh, you have to
Yeah.
pick so and
Right.
like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
It can be hard on the friends too. Yeah. Yeah.
and
There's
it's
a really great podcast. Danielle Bayard Jackson has a podcast called Friend Forward, and we just talked about this on her podcast
oh,
too.
nice. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, there people know what to do when you lose
Mhm.
someone.
Right.
But you do feel at a loss when someone's going through a divorce because you're like,
Mhm.
what do I say? What do I do? What do I not say? What do
Right.
I not do?
Right. Yeah.
And I love that you brought up the, don't say, why is this taking so long? Because when I was
Mhm.
younger, I dated someone. It was I was like 29, 30. The first time I dated someone that was getting a divorce, and it was
Uh-huh.
in New York. So and he had kids. So that
Mhm.
process takes years and years. And I had I didn't think it was like, I'm going to divorce, sign a paper, but
Right.
different states, different places, it can take a
Yeah.
really long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody wants to hear, why isn't
Right.
it done? Because I'm sure they want it to be done too.
Yes. 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 Exactly.
Well, let's move on to
Mhm.
talking about your book. One of the things, well, I also saw this when you were on CBS talking about a gray divorce, and it was not a term
Oh,
I was
yeah.
familiar with. And then I looked it up, and I'm like, I mean, it makes
Oh, yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to hear that people, women over 50 are the ones that are initiating divorces more for a variety of reasons. I know, because I'm in perimenopause and I talk about it all the time.
Uh-huh.
You hear about that too. Do you think that's an influence of menopause and perimenopause, that women are like, I'm fed up and this is the time I'm gonna get?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Definitely. I mean, gray divorce is the fastest growing segment of the population that's, is getting divorced. So it's people over 50, the rate has tripled in the last 2 decades. And for people over 65, it's tripled the rate. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. And certainly one is people are tying it to menopause. I think, the hormones that we have before we're in menopause are often really related to this kind of caretaking, people pleasing behaviors. And when people go through menopause, some people will say, oh, well, women get grouchier. And some people will say, well, women have more clarity and they're less willing to be a caretaker to another fully grown adult, right? They're less willing to like pick up somebody's socks.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you hear that too, a lot of women saying, I feel like I have another child. My mom used to
Yes.
joke, my parents were married for a long time, and my mom used to joke that she had 4 children, and one of
Yes.
them was my dad. And,
Yes.
I mean, she was the silent gen. So even though she was teaching us to be independent, like, she
Mhm.
was still taking care of him, and then would get annoyed that he couldn't do things. I'm like, well, you kind of put
Mhm.
yourself in that, but
Right.
he also
Right.
was a good
Right.
kid. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I hear that a lot. A lot. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also noticed that in guys that I've dated, that like, I went out with a guy once for dinner, and he was uh Jewish, Orthodox Jewish. So like,
Mhm.
but he didn't know how to order on a menu, and he was asking me questions. I'm like,
Mm.
do you,
Wow.
he's like, well, my wife did all this. And I'm like, okay. I had to go tell the waiter, by the way, he's very kosher and he can't eat this. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not taking on a project,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so yeah, it's very interesting. So I know your book covers all stages, all ages,
Mhm.
whether you're
Mhm.
gay, straight. Well, let's talk about that for a minute,
Mhm.
because we typically think of divorce, a man and a woman,
Right.
but now we should also think about, women,
Absolutely.
men, women, women. Is that a
Yep.
different dynamic? How do you talk about that in your book?
Yeah, same-sex couples are getting married and getting divorced, and so much of the divorce literature and professionals only talk about straight marriage. And so it was really important to me in this book to make sure that I did address some of the issues that come up for same-sex couples and include a number of vignettes in the book, because I have a lot of vignettes in the book. And so I wanted to make sure that lesbian couples were represented in the book. I think what I have experienced in my practice is that what it the sexuality matters less than whether or not you have kids. So, like, each marriage and each divorce is totally unique. And yet there's these very common kind of themes and feelings that really connect people and that people can really relate to. And I think same-sex couples deal with the same kinds of things as straight couples. I think there are few differences. One of the differences is there's not the patriarchy isn't baked into same-sex couples as much in terms of the woman being in straight marriages where the woman is kind of the default caretaker and parenting person. There's that research that shows that when straight couples get married, the woman's household labor goes up by 7 hours a week and the man's goes down by 1 hour. So in same sex couples, there still can be a distribution of labor, but it does tend to be more equitable. And it's not just assumed that one person is going to do the labor and one person isn't. Um,
That's so
so
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
so it's
also see, yeah, go ahead.
oh no, I was saying when you were talking about, it about men, the men benefit from marriage, and
Totally.
even, as our society is supposed to keep advancing, there are, people that are in Gen X. I mean, this is a Gen X podcast that still are acting in their marriages like we're in the 50s, and
Hmm.
they'll complain about their husbands not doing anything. And I'm like, well, you're letting them not do anything, but why do men still think that they can just go to work, come home and sit, and they call, they're taking care of their kids babysitting? It's like, no, you're parenting.
Right,
So
right,
it's
right.
interesting that we're still in this place where men are still
Hmm.
benefiting more from
Hmm.
marriages. Women are still, I mean, during COVID, when
Oh,
women left the workforce because of having to take care of kids, and
yeah,
it's like we take 2 steps back and it feels like
right.
10 steps back. How,
Yeah.
in that dynamic too, once you get divorced, whether you're in same-sex marriage or in a straight marriage, how does that dynamic change? Like, do women feel, I know that their workload is increased or decreased, or does it depend how the divorce goes?
So here's a really interesting fact. When straight women get divorced, they sleep more hours per week and they do less housework per week. Not because their houses are dirtier, it's just because they're only taking care of themselves and maybe their kids. They're not taking care of another human adult and they're getting better sleep, which is really
Which,
remarkable.
yeah, because sleep is always a
Yeah.
challenge, especially as you get older. Well, let's just take a little step back up, like, to talk about your
Yeah.
book to start with. Like, what inspired you to say, okay, I want to write a book that's
Hmm.
basically a guide for women getting
Hmm.
divorced of all ages, of all,
Hmm.
whether they're straight, LGBT. Like, what inspired you to sit down and write this book?
Yeah, well, as I said before, I was leading all of these divorce support groups, and each time I would lead a group, three every week, people would say these incredible things, or I would say something that was really helpful to the women in the group, and I just started kind of collecting them in my mind and thinking like, wow, that's a thing that I said that was really helpful, or that's something that somebody else said that was really helpful, and I finally decided like I'm beginning to feel a little bit like a hoarder, like I'm hoarding all of these like great insights in my mind and I better write these things down so that I don't forget them and then the other thing that happened was that women kept asking me for a book. They kept saying, the women in my practice kept saying, "Well, do you have any books for about the emotional journey of divorce?" And I had a book, but it was written in 1992. And that book kind of got every year, that book got progressively more and more and more outdated. And when I looked at all the books out there, I didn't find this book that I have now written. So I wrote it because I had amassed so much useful information in my mind. And I wrote it because I really believe it's the book that women need. And I know that because of my practice. And so because I can't run, you know, 100 support groups, right? I wish I could, but I can't. So I wanted to bring this information out to to a wider audience. And some people have said to me, some people have said it feels like the book is a best friend that I can talk to and listen to. And some people have said it feels like the book is a support group because there's so many vignettes in it. And it feels like I'm in a support group when I'm reading it. So that was kind of my intention. And I'm glad that it's been received that way.
That's amazing. And I love that you included vignettes, because a lot of times when you're reading books that are designed to help you with your life, they'll just
Hmm.
talk about stuff and you're like, okay, how does that
How do I
work? How
do
do I
that? Right.
do this?
Yeah.
So, um, I'm guessing you use the things that you learned and like the real life experiences to kind of show people like, okay, if we're talking about this subject, this is what you can do.
Exactly, exactly. I also know that when women are going through a divorce, it can be hard for them to read dense text. So I wanted to make a book that was really complete, but also easy to read. And part of being easy to read is to kind of have short bits of information and then a little story that goes with it and then an exercise and then some more information and then a vignette and then an exercise. So that was also a big consideration in writing the book, was just making sure that it was something, because I know certainly when I went through my divorce, if I had picked up a book and it was just like 300 pages of like dense text, I just would have thrown it away. I mean, I couldn't handle it at that point. I wanted something that was really accessible.
Because you're already, you're
Right.
emotional, you're being
Yeah.
taxed, your emotions,
Yeah.
your brain is being
Right.
taxed. You got to figure out all
Yeah.
the, ins and outs
When
of everything. Yeah.
when stress goes up, cognition goes down. And luckily it comes back. I say to it, they're like, "Oh my God, I used to be able to read, and now I can't read." And I'm like, "Don't worry, it will come back. You'll be able to read again." But, it's
Yeah.
just during this time of stress that it's going to be hard. And I also recorded the audiobook because some people, you know, just also as a safety issue, like some people don't, they might be thinking about divorce. They're not going to put it on their bedside table or, be reading it in the car when they go to pick up their kids from school. Right.
Yeah.
So they can have it in their ear and nobody will know.
Exactly. Just like people who, listen to the very racy romance sometimes will do the audio.
Yes.
They're like, I don't want to be on the subway or in public,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
everybody's reading them and, listening to them. Yeah, no, I love that because I think people, you forget that this is like such an emotional time and you do need help.
Mhm.
It's nice to have a book that you
Yes.
can listen to or read that you can,
Yeah.
look up. So
Right.
like, if I'm dealing with this, let me go, look
Yes.
at that
Yeah,
and
that's the other thing that's I think I was so conscious of, is like, you don't have to start at page 1 and then go to the end with this book. You can be like, "Okay, I need to know how to tell my kids. I'm gonna go to the kids chapter. I need to know, okay, I'm already through the divorce. I wanna think about dating. Let me go to the dating chapter and skip the rest. Or I need to tell my spouse I wanna get a divorce. Like, what's the best way to do that? You know?
yeah, the dating part. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've never been married, but I've been on the like I've dated, like I said, people that have been divorced, and it's funny to be
Mhm.
someone that has never been married, and I get judged, and I'm like, I'm not judging you for being
Yeah.
divorced,
Yes.
and for whatever the reason is, but why am I
Right.
being judged because I decided I didn't want to compromise or what? I have like a different perspective, but it's so weird. But yeah,
Mhm.
speaking of dating, I mean dating's hard nowadays anyways.
Yeah.
Um, the apps are
Yeah.
not making it any better.
That's right.
But for women who are thinking, in the Gen X age groups, like 46 and to like what would be 61 this year,
Mhm.
what are their, unique challenges that they face when
Mhm.
they're deciding to date or are dating?
Mhm. Right, right. I think for a lot of people, if they've been in a long-term marriage, they often feel like they go back to the age they were before they got married. So like a 55-year-old woman who's been married for 30 years, when she goes back on the dating scene, she feels like she's 25. She doesn't feel like her body's 25, but she feels like her kind of emotional life is 25. I really like to give women permission, especially the older you get. I think what I've seen is that women maybe want something different than what they had before. They might be not looking for, I want to, I mean, certainly not if they already have kids and their kids are grown. They may not, they're probably not looking for somebody to have kids with or even somebody to parent their kids. They might be looking for somebody that they can date in a long-term way, but keep it more casual. Or like there's this whole new movement called living apart together. Vicki Larson has that great book, Living Apart Together. Two houses, we get together for sleepovers and Saturday night dinners, and we don't live together. So I think really just giving people permission that we don't have to do things the way we've always done them, right? I think the other thing that I see a lot is women who, if they've been betrayed in their marriage, oftentimes they really have trouble trusting not only other people, but trusting themselves. So if they've been betrayed, they might think like, how am I going to ever trust myself again? Like I thought I trusted my ex, my spouse, but now they betrayed me so badly and I didn't see it coming. So how am I ever going to trust anybody else again? And so what I really advise is like, you take it very slow. You're not you're not meeting somebody to decide to get married. The only thing you do when you meet somebody is decide, do I want to see that person one more time? That's it. That's all you're doing. So really helping to slow them down and just take it one step at a time, right?
And so when giving advice to someone who's like, okay, I think I'm good, I want to start dating, is it, better to like figure out what you want first, or just kind of to go with the flow and just see what's out there and figure it out?
Mhm.
Does it depend? I mean, it might just depend on the person.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. I think if you have really strong feelings about what you want, like some people get out of a marriage and they're like, you know what? I didn't have sex for the last 10 years. Like, I just want to go out and have sex with a bunch of people. And like, great, more power to you. Just be safe, but have as much sex as you want. And other people are like, I have no interest in sex. Like, that's something that feels kind of traumatic to me. So I just want to like meet somebody and like have dinner like a lot of times before we even kiss, so if then that's great, you should say that up front. And if you don't know, or if things change, then one of the ways to kind of figure it out is to go and date and see, like, use each date as like a data point, like, oh, I realized I thought I really wanted a lot of sex, but now I realized that didn't feel so good. And so I'd actually really rather have a relationship that's more of a, medium term or long term relationship. Or, I thought I wanted a long term relationship, but really it turns out I just want to make out with somebody, totally fine. Do it, do it. Just be clear and safe,
So what about, a lot of women, or whether they've been married or not, are making the decision to just not date anymore.
Yep.
I'm kind of one of those where
Yep.
I'm like, I've had it. I
Yep.
need a break.
Yep.
But I feel like it's a different decision when you've been divorced, and maybe not, but a different decision as in, do you really need to think about like, am I doing this because I've been so badly hurt that I just don't ever think I can get past it? Or I did the marriage, I did the kids, I'm good, I just want to enjoy my life. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think like you really need to think about why you're not dating before you just not date?
You can think about it, but I think if you don't want to, you don't have to. And also never say never. A lot of people, I think, coming out of divorce say there is no way I want to date somebody right now. And I always say that's totally fine for right now. And don't cut yourself off from the possibility in the future. Well, you don't know what you might want in the future. So could
Yeah.
happen or not. And it's totally fine either way. But I think there's a lot more acceptance now. And what I like to say is not that you're not dating or you are dating. It's like, are you dating another person or are you dating yourself? Because if you're not dating another person, I hope you are dating yourself, right? I hope you're like buying yourself flowers and taking yourself out and going on trips and spending the money or the energy that you would have spent on dating on yourself and, making yourself feel good.
Yeah, because you're probably, if you're coming out of a divorce, like you've been a we and now you're a me. And I'm sure
Yes.
a lot of women have to figure out how to, you know, find themselves again and not just be
Yes.
identified as Mrs. So and so and the mother of
Right.
so and so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge identity shift, I think, that comes along with getting divorced and in the post-divorce process. And I think as women, we are so, and especially Gen X women, we're so socialized to think about what everybody else needs and wants. And so divorce actually offers an opportunity to think about what you want and what you need, which is
Yeah.
actually really cool.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, like Gen X was raised by boomer and silent Gen moms who were telling us like, you can do whatever you want and you can
Right.
have this and have that.
Mhm.
And but yet
Mhm.
we were still kind of also told like when you get married, you're gonna be a wife and a mother, and we have
Mhm.
a natural instinct, most of us, to
Mhm.
take care. And so it can be hard, yeah, figuring out like what do I like, or what do
Mhm.
I want to do, and who am I beyond,
Yeah.
just a couple.
Encourage women to, when they get divorced, to make a bucket list and to have small things and big things on their bucket list. I was talking to somebody on an online book event the other night, and she was saying, well, I had a bucket list, but now my finances mean that I can't do certain things. And I was like, your bucket list can include little things and big, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to go skiing in the Alps. It could be something as simple as, like, I always recommend that women, when they get divorced, change their bedding, get new bedding, throw out your old bedding, get new bedding, if you can afford it. And then, like, paint your walls the color that you love the most, right? Rearrange your furniture, like, make your space your own. Make your physical space your own, make your social media space your own. Whatever we're ingesting is that's going to impact us a lot.
Yeah.
So,
And that brings up a point about your living space, right? Because if maybe, some women, they stay in the house, the guys leave, sometimes you sell the house. But if you're staying in the house, still have that trauma from your divorce. Like, so I love the idea of, like, yeah, paint the walls, get new bedding, change things out so that it becomes your space, not the place I used to live with my husband.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even, if you're moving to a new place, like, yeah, you don't have to worry about anybody else's opinion. You can just, I like that.
Yeah,
You can make your
exactly.
bedroom as girly as you want it, and there's no one to object to it.
Now we have, in the past we had wedding registries and baby registries. Well, there's also a divorce registry now. Fresh Starts Registry has a divorce registry, because when do you need a blender? You don't usually need a blender when you're getting married, because you already have two blenders, right? But when you're getting divorced, if your spouse has taken the blender, you need a blender.
Yeah, and you should celebrate too, instead of just be, I mean, yes, it's hard. I'm not dismissing that, but sometimes you need to, like, put your mindset of, like, what can I celebrate about myself in this new life?
Yes.
And that brings me to, as we're wrapping up, my last question. What would you say, besides go get your book, what would you say to women who are maybe in this place where, they're struggling to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel of divorce, and they think, like, my life is over and nothing's going to be the same, which of course is not true. What would you say to them so they can maybe shift their mindset into a better space?
What I would say is that I can tell them that I have seen literally hundreds and hundreds of women through the process of divorce. And for the most part, I would say 95% of them come out the other side and feel happier and more empowered and stronger than when they entered. But I think it's not just about the passage of time, it's also about your investment. And so it takes a lot of time and energy to be in an unhealthy marriage and to be in a divorce. So once you're done with that divorce, don't just say, okay, I'm done. Take that energy and invest it. Invest it in something new that brings you meaning, purpose, and joy, so that you can have a new part of the next chapter that really is meaningful to you.
Because, I noticed in your interviews and articles, I know this, you talk about this in your book, like, women actually do better after, after their marriage is over than men do, and they're completely transformed. So I'm like, I think that's amazing, because, that probably wasn't the case 60, 50 years ago. So,
75% of women don't regret being divorced. So that's a pretty high number. And hopefully for our listeners out there, that's you too.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This was so enlightening and informative. And I hope that everyone who is listening, who has been divorced, thinking about divorce, going through it, that you learned a lot. And if you haven't, to let you understand more of what it's like to go through it. Because, if you've never walked in that person's shoes, you have no idea. And as women, sometimes we tend to give the worst advice to each other. Listen to this episode and realize this is what you need to tell your. So your book is out now and is available in bookstores everywhere and online.
Everywhere books are sold. Yes. I also have a ton of free resources on my website, which is oonametz.com. So if people want resources, articles, podcasts, legal, financial, emotional resources about divorce, feel free to go to my website. There's you don't have to put it in your email or anything like that. You can just have access to all of it.
Awesome. Well, that'll answer I had a question about the financial or finances. So you can go to Oona's website. We'll have all that in the show notes, link to get her book, the article that she wrote for Time, and the CBS interview. Because it's really cool to see, like, just to, imagine what it's like sitting in New York and doing that. So thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you, is social media the best place, your website?
Yes, I'm Oona Metz on Instagram. I would welcome you there, and LinkedIn as well. I'm also on Facebook at Women Navigating Divorce. I'm on YouTube as well, and I just commissioned my stepdaughter to set up a TikTok account for me. So I'll see you over there too.
All right. Well, I will include all that. Thank you again so much. This was such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
That wraps up our first episode of the new season in year 3 of the podcast. So still so crazy to think that. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Oona. She is a wealth of information, and I really recommend picking up her book, reading her articles, visiting her website, all of which will be included in the show notes, following her on social. And if you're a woman going through a divorce, no matter your age or what stage of life that you're in, whether you're gay or straight, I think she has a lot of practical, helpful information and tools, as you could see by this interview, to help you get through a really challenging time. And I also recommend checking out her resources too for anybody who has a friend or family member going through a divorce, because we need to be there for each other and not give bad advice and not take sides, and just listen and know that we're saying the right things. Or if we don't know what to say, like, hey, I heard about this podcast, or I heard about Oona Metz, and I recommend that you check her out because she can help you more than I can. But, I'm here for you. So thank you for tuning in. We will have another discussion about divorce in a couple of weeks, focusing on what it's like for men and how they can deal with it. Because as I've mentioned before, this podcast is for every Gen Xer. And as someone who dates men, who has dated men that have been divorced, or has family members who have gone through divorce, I think it's important that we also talk about what it's like for men and make sure that y'all are getting the information that you need. And before I sign off, we are also in the process of choosing our winter book club pick. I've uploaded some information on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, but we'll make the pick in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. I will announce it on the podcast as well. And without further ado, let me end the podcast the way I end every show. Don't you forget about me, because I will not forget about you.